Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by today with our standard routine weekly update that we covered in full in a video earlier on today. We got our final new aftermarket part for season 3, known as the JAK Patriot. And ever since it was announced, this is an aftermarket part that a lot of players have had their eyes on because it takes the M16, a weapon that really since its inception back in Warzone 2 and MW2 last year was completely useless, and it turns it into a fully auto version of itself. So in theory, it could make it very, very lethal and potentially even an actual meta rifle. And today, I want to break down whether or not the JAK Patriot is actually worth using, what its strengths are, what its weaknesses are, and give you guys the best setup for it as well in case you want to test it out yourselves. So first things first, obviously in order to get the JAK Patriot, you do have to complete 5 of the weekly challenges here. If you're a free-to-play player just going through in Warzone, it's pretty self-explanatory getting these kills. Plunder is by far the best way to go out and do all these. Just getting kills in the different regions, placing in the top 10 is obviously a battle royale or resurgence thing. Reviving teammates is pretty easy. Opening caches is pretty easy. It's just a little bit more time consuming. Zombies is pretty straightforward this week as well. Personally, I did mine in multiplayer. It took me like 3 games total to get these done. I will note that as I'm recording this, the BP50 challenge to get 5 double kills using the BP50 conversion kit does not track for me at all. I was trying to get this one done quick because it's nice and easy. Would not track for me whatsoever. Maybe by the time this video goes out, that'll be fixed, but as of right now, it doesn't seem to be working as intended or tracking properly. But I just did 5, pretty straightforward here. Like I said, only a couple of games, and you have that unlocked. But this, keep in mind, if you don't complete it this season, will end up turning into an armory unlock for next season. So you only have to do like your 3 dailies or whatever to get it unlocked then if you're not able to complete it now. But then that said, how does this actually behave? Well, now if you go through to your M16 after you scroll through the 900 different assault rifles on the menu, you've got the JAK Patriot conversion kit, which you can see ends up actually adjusting the recoil. They say it adjusts the headshot damage, the general damage range, and then slightly a whole plus 1% on that hip fire spread max. But mainly it turns it into full auto. And you can see that right away when we go into the firing range here. It is an interesting behaving weapon for sure. Keep in mind, at its core here, this is still an MW2 weapon, and that in and of itself is going to limit you in some capacity. But because we are turning this into full auto, I feel like 110% you absolutely have to be running an extended mag on there to get those full 60 rounds. Now, here's the deal. It's actually already been tested. I know JGod tested, and he was posting on Twitter about it earlier. The fire rate that it says in game, not actually accurate here. It's a fast fire rate. JGod said close to about an 800 RPM as opposed to the 600 that it says in game. Then you compare that with its damage stats here, that effective damage range of roughly 25 meters, the headshot, the upper body, the lower torso, and everything going on there. That fire rate mixed with those stats means that it's going to have an actually impactful TTK pretty much at every range. Whether you're playing close range, mid range, or long range, it's going to have a TTK that is similar to several other meta weapons. So what really matters here the most now is the behavior of this gun. Does it actually feel like a meta gun? Is it easy to use? Does it have the necessary control? Things like that. So we've got our 60 round mag on there. That's going to be a no-brainer. The thing here, though, is that with this Patriot conversion kit, while it does make it full auto, it does actually end up replacing your barrel. So you don't have any things you can adjust there whatsoever. Now, you might have seen when I was spraying into the wall there, but the recoil on this thing is, well, kind of rough. With 60 rounds here, if I just let the pattern go, you can see there is a ton of movement on this thing. That is a large recoil pattern. Now, it's very straightforward. It's very predictable. It's just up and to the right. So you can control this relatively easily. Obviously, the further out when you're fighting at 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 meters, it's going to be harder to control that accurately and stay on target, but it's predictable, but there's a lot of movement there. So unfortunately, you do have to end up focusing a lot on control here. And that's why first up right away, I'm going to go for Cassis Break. It's going to help out with that horizontal control, make things a little bit easier there. I would not recommend something like Zem here. That's going to hurt the velocity even more, which is not ideal. Cassis Break or a general compensator there is going to be your go-to option in my opinion. And then right alongside that, Bruin Heavy Support I think is going to be a good choice too. While it is doing a little bit more to that vertical control and pushing it up even more, you're going to get that better horizontal control and gun kick, but also Again, keep in mind, this is an MW2 gun, so with that, these weapons do have worse firing aim stability, worse aiming idle sway than a lot of the MW3 options. When we can gain that out of an attachment, that makes things a lot more important. So that's another wildly important one here. And even if we go into the firing range now with just these 4 setups on, you can see that was our old pattern there. We'll go through and start a new one, and it's definitely not nearly as obnoxious. I am standing a little bit closer, but the pattern, you can tell, is certainly a little bit more tame when you go through and you just let it rip. It's not going to have nearly as much movement, and it's going to be a bit more predictable there across the board. You can see there's a little bit less deviance going left to right there, as opposed to the first pattern there where it is going up and to the left, but it's bouncing a little bit more in between. Now, this is where things get very tricky for this gun. Because this is an aftermarket part and using the conversion kit counts as one attachment, we are extremely limited in what we want to do here. Frankly, that recoil pattern is still not where I'd like it to be. And if you're fighting for mid to long range, iron sights here, a little bit more of a subjective thing, you might want to go through and run with an optic, whether it's a 2.5 times or a glassless or a slate, whatever the case might be. And with that, that's your 5th and final attachment outright. I do want to go against some dummies here and just show you guys what it's like to shoot over range with this thing. You can see when you're actually focusing on the recoil, it's not too bad, but it is noticeable. That bounce, even as we're going here, is noticeable across the board. It's something that you're gonna have to get used to for sure, having to pull down into the right that drastically as you get to those longer distance gunfights, where obviously it's much more difficult to stay on that final target, or moving targets nonetheless, in actual games. And with this setup in particular, which is pretty much all control based, right, and then general ease of use, when we go into our advanced stats again, you can see our bullet velocity is only 720. That for long range is not great. That's going to mean our hit scan range is pretty limited there. It's not going to be really feeling phenomenal when you get into 50, 60, 70 meter fights around that area. So really, if you're trying to optimize it for mid to long range, now you'd probably have to end up dropping the Eagle Eye optic and putting on high grain rounds, which again will impact your control there and also hurt the velocity. You could mess around some with maybe high velocity ammo, hurt your range a little bit and get slightly better control, but still, regardless of how you want to balance that now, whether one versus the other, you're still going to have to deal with an iron sights over range, which can be tricky at times as well. So that's something to take note of too. Meaning, at the end of the day, long story short here, this is the go-to meta loadout I would recommend for the M16. And if you want to use it in the mid-range, it'll be decent there. If you want to use it long range, it'll be decent there. Truly, its most competitive TTK is probably its close range because the fire rate, but you're not going to get a build that's fast enough and capable enough to compete with SMGs in that range, making it a little bit more obsolete. Like, even with this for range, our ADS and sprint to fire is already not that great. If we were to build around this, we're going to get worse control. It's just not going to be versatile enough for that style of play, meaning that while this gun has the TTK that can compete with other guns, while it's got the fire rate that can compete with other guns, it is lacking in the overall feel. So a fun weapon, but ultimately, I think they kind of missed the mark on this aftermarket part a little bit. They had a chance to make an MW2 weapon really, really good and really advantageous, but this one, it just is not checking all the right boxes, I guess you could say. There is a little bit of lacking elements to this with the control, with the velocity. Your attachment limitations here in general do stop you from having like a true meta rifle, but it's a fun one and one that you could get away with using. If you use it enough, you get familiar with it, you get comfortable with it. It's something that could pass, but it's not going to, you know, be an absolute #1 meta. So definitely a cool aftermarket part, one I know a lot of players are looking forward to, and that's the best setup for it and sort of how I think it breaks down in the overall meta. Probably more in that competitive / low end top tier area in general. If you guys enjoyed the video though, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you are new to the channel or you simply have not subscribed yet, be sure to hit that subscribe button on your way out to guarantee you're always up to date with everything going on in COD. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.